and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
And I'm Chris Cooper, filling in for Ann Northrup. And boy, am I going to have words with her when she gets back for having me do a week with so much news.
Happy Independence Day, viewers, and Chris.
Thank you, Andy.
How in this horrible week for the Republic can we celebrate Independence Day?
Drink yourself into a stupor, eat lots of cherry pie. I don't know. Whatever satisfies the senses to numb the thinking brain, because a lot has happened.
It's a rough week.
It's a bad week.
It's a bad week, but let's go to the headlines. So President Biden bombed in the debate, but he scored at the Stonewall National Monument with Elton John by his side.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump told a record number of lies in the debate as the Supreme Court clears the way for his dictatorship.
This is not an exaggeration. There was a White House Pride celebration led by Dr. Jill Biden.
We'll show you some scenes from the Drag March, the Dyke March, and the Queer Liberation March, all here in New York City.
A Texas court upheld the ban on gender-affirming care there for youth.
But the Biden administration opposes surgery for trans minors.
Controversially. Oklahoma is mandating the teaching of the Bible on pain of losing your teacher license.
And we've lost two notable black lesbians, an Army intelligence legend and an award-winning playwright.
A trans and non-binary U.S. runner qualifies for the Paris Olympics, as does the first gay male in judo.
Civil partnerships have gotten underway in Latvia.
And comedian Amber Ruffin comes out.
But first, the hideously bad news.
Well, we start with that debate. We all saw it with our own eyes.
Well, not everybody watched it, but even if they didn't,
51 million people.
But even if they didn't watch, they heard about it afterwards.
You saw there. Let's put a picture of these two up there. This was the debacle that we watched. And now, of course, listening to everything Trump said, it was just everything he said was horrendous. We just didn't have Biden able to take him on very well.
Right.
I mean, the Philadelphia Inquirer called for Trump to step down after the debate, citing 30 demonstrable lies and lots of anti-American dystopian rhetoric, like calling us a third world nation and a failing country that is living in hell. And they said, these go with the literally 30,000 lies that he told while he was president.
If you read the Philadelphia Inquirer piece, and it's worth reading, it's a powerful indictment. The problem is, Donald Trump isn't listening to it. He's not gonna step down. We know that. And so why is everyone on Biden's case? Because he doesn't look like he can, well, let me put it this way. I look at this from a two-pronged perspective, and that's, number one, was his debate flub, because he was awful, was his debate flub fatal? Because it's not always necessarily fatal. Maybe you can come back from it. Some things are fatal, like when Rick Perry forgot the name of the Department of Education that he was saying he was going to abolish, and he couldn't even name during the debate he was in what department he was going to abolish. So sometimes it's fatal. And the other important part of the equation is, to whom is it fatal? Because, you and I, and probably most of you out there, are gonna vote for Biden no matter what. He could be a reanimated corpse and we'd still vote for him. Question is, in the minds of undecided voters in swing states, was this so fatal that they're now gonna pull the lever for Trump, even if they're gonna hold their nose? Those are the two questions that need to be answered. The problem is, even if we answer them that, yeah, Biden's got to go, the only one who can do that at this point is Biden. And does he see that? Or is he going to be like Ruth Bader Ginsburg? And, not
hang in there until she dies.
Exactly. Not exit when it will do the most good for the Republic.
Right.
So, I don't know.
Well, I fear for the Republic. And look, you've all heard the stuff about the debates and, about the debate debacle. But, I think the worst, even worse debacle were all the decisions handed down by the Supreme Court this past week.
This is why it was a brutal week.
That's why you can call them the Imperial Court, which is also the name for a group of drag queens who raise money.
Well, it started on Friday when the January 6th rioters got a pass, some of them. It's not a complete pass, but basically the Supreme Court decided that, oh yeah, you know what? They can't be charged with trying to obstruct an official proceeding because they didn't destroy any documents.
I mean, it's just
even
nuts.
Amy Coney Barrett couldn't go for that.
This court is determined to get Trump reelected so that he can appoint replacements for the older ones, like Alito and Justice Thomas. They are determined to hold on to power. They've been dedicated to it forever, and they've been very successful at it.
Well,
and we're not.
And you got to keep in mind that two of the people who decided this January 6th rioter case were actually supporters of January 6th rioters who refused to recuse themselves.
Absolutely.
Clarence Thomas, whose wife, Ginny Thomas, is actively in support of January 6th rioters, and Alito, who flew flags over his homes that were in favor of J6 rioters, and yet they didn't recuse themselves, and we get this decision.
And even when they allowed emergency care that might include abortion in Idaho after holding this decision up for many months, they didn't resolve the underlying issue of does everybody have to provide abortion care? They did it on a technicality, and they sent it back. They also cleared the way for politicians to take bribes, because they take bribes all the time. You read about it every day, and they don't pay taxes on their bribes. I mean, corruption.
The hubris.
The corruption is insane. So now politicians can take bribes. Donald Trump will like that too.
Yeah, and to be clear, the way the decision was worded, they said, oh, if you get some sort of gift or benefit from someone after you've done a favor for them, oh, that's not a bribe.
Well, they blocked the Environmental Protection Agency from enforcing anti-pollution laws by states polluting downwind and other states. They cleared the way. They really did clear the way for a Trump dictatorship with the immunity decision. I mean, this is so appalling to finally say, no, the president is above the law. You can't charge him with any crime for anything he does that is remotely connected to being president. And it's just insane. And they also said they criminalized the homeless.
Oh, yes.
If, you fall asleep at a park or you sleep on the street, you are now a criminal, according to the Supreme Court. Where are you supposed to go?
Not only that, but the way they phrased it was that, or the way the decision was that in the jurisdiction where they were saying, oh, we want to be able to make it illegal to sleep on the streets, they have no shelters and they have no provision for shelters. So it's kind of like you're stuck. There's no place else for you to go, but.
And we have a country, where we passed a lot of laws and we charged the agency with enforcing them and interpreting them. That's over now. You've heard of this Chevron decision. This is under the Ronald Reagan administration. The court said, no, the federal government can make regulations and interpret them and things like that because it helped Ronald Reagan. Now they're saying, because Biden's president or the Democrats, they're saying no. They have taken the power away from federal agency to apply laws. And this we're unprotected, including in health care, including for a lot of things that LGBTQ people ought to be concerned about.
Correct.
You're not protected anymore.
A lot of that is from the way existing regulations have been interpreted by friendly administrations, like Title IX interpretations, which will come up later in the news. I don't want to leave quite yet the immunity decision because I want to read a couple of things from some of the conservative justices who talked about immunity, who said during their confirmation, for example, Kavanaugh, that no one is above the law. That is just such a foundational principle of the Constitution and equal justice under the law. That was Kavanaugh. Gorsuch has said, no man is above the law. No man. Amy Coney Barrett said 3 times that nobody was above the law.
It's over.
And yet?
We have a king, or we will have a king if we get a president like Trump who wants to be one. Eric Holder, the former Attorney General, said the ruling is absurd and dangerous, a monstrosity, and I think we should read from Justice Sotomayor's dissent in the immunity case. The court effectively creates a law-free zone around the president, upsetting the status quo that has existed since the founding. she said, this new official acts immunity now lies about like a loaded weapon for any president that wishes to place his own interests, his own political survival, or his own financial gain above the interests of the nation. I mean, she said democracy has essentially died with this.
So, what do we do? I know, Andy Seifert, we've been having this conversation, this argument. I told him we'd have a hair-pulling fight, in which case I'd win. I think what you've been saying for a long, long time, Andy, and I've agreed all along, is that when we have control of the presidency and both houses of Congress, we expand the Supreme Court.
We did have control of that, and we didn't do it.
I know.
Because there are not enough Democrats even to go along with getting rid of the filibuster or getting statehood for the District of Columbia.
Correct, and that timidity is what we have to get the Democrats to overcome. Because it is not a radical proposition to expand the Supreme Court.
No.
It's been done in the past.
Many times.
And it's completely legal. So that's
you
how
can also reduce the number if you want.
Well, but that's how we pull the Supreme Court back from the brink. And that's for starters, but there's plenty of things we still can do. We just have to get ourselves in a position to do it, which is what the right wing has done over the course of several decades. They bided their time and they got their fingers into the various local governments and then worked their way up to the state governments and captured those.
And they're winning, and they won in France, and they won in the Netherlands. I mean, the right wing, they're prevailing.
But you know where they're not prevailing? In the culture. We still have the culture, and that's really important because the culture shapes how people think. And so we can springboard from that, and we have a lot of work to do over the long time and over the short term too. But it's doable.
Well, I mean, I think things are so far gone at this point that people have to look at look, Thomas Jefferson was not my favorite founder, even though I went to the University of Virginia, which he founded. But he said, when the system, this is what they did in 1776. It is Independence Day this week, right? He said, when the system doesn't work for you, get rid of it. Get a new system. You need a whole new system. We've had a crap system from the beginning in this country, and it's not fair. It's not one person, one vote. The Senate has too much power, the small states, all that stuff. The Electoral College, come on. We could do better. And so that sounds grandiose to talk about that. But there's also the issue of states asserting themselves and having more devolution to the states. The red states have gone far to the right. Well, we have to ignore some of these Supreme Court decisions in the blue states and start governing ourselves. This is the kind of stuff that I think we have to start thinking about if we're going to survive.
I take a more pragmatic attitude, which is that there are still levers in the system that we can use to bring things back from the brink. And so it's going to take time, it's going to take work, both in the short term and in the long term, but all right.
All right. And by the way, one of the other things Trump did this week, he said he wants trials for all of his critics, starting with Lynn Cheney. He wants treason trials for them, military treason trials. If that's not enough to repel you from this, well, I'm talking to the converted here. By the way, we have a picture of this guy. He's on Ed Martin. He's on the Republican National Committee Platform Committee, one of 3 members. He's from the right-wing Eagle Forum. He wants a federal ban on abortion. He questions the safety of birth control, and he wants prison sentences for women who get abortions and the doctors who perform them. That's who they are.
Now, at the same time, the right wing, the most extreme right-wing groups, are concerned that Trump is going to try to simplify the Republican platform and tamp down. It doesn't mean that he's not still going to be doing crazy things and trying to, pass anti-abortion laws and all that. But he wants to take it out of the platform so it's sanitized and it's easier to read because it's over 60 pages long right now. And, we know Trump doesn't read anything more than 60 words, if that. And then they've got to have pictures if he's going to read it. And
there are some conservatives rebelling against him over that. They say, you don't pull back. We want all that anti-gay stuff explicitly in this platform. Trump has no trouble saying, I want to stop the trans madness. That's his big line.
But he wants to tamp down the anti-gay stuff, and in particular, he wants to tamp down the anti-abortion stuff in the platform. And so the right-wingers and things like the Family Research Council, they're banding together to form a coalition to prevent that from happening. So that's also going on.
I mean, in that sense, there's some hope. I mean, because they are such extremists.
Yes.
But I hope everybody out there recognizes it, and your families recognize it when they go to the polls. I mean, of course, you know, we're talking about all the bad stuff. Can we move on to the 55th anniversary of the Stonewall Rebellion this week?
Let's talk about it. Some at least locally good stuff.
Here in New York, the president came to the opening of the Stonewall Visitor Center in the other half. This is in the other half of what used to be the whole Stonewall Inn. It was an empty room. It was bought by a private group called Pride Live, and they had a big ceremonial thing. Biden said, "This beloved bar became the site of a call for freedom, dignity, and equality and respect." Of course, what my problem with that is the revolution was in the streets. It was not in a bar.
Right.
And that's what the Stonewall National Monument is. It's not a bar. It's, you know, it happened because the police raided the bar.
And the bar was part of the rebellion in that the police barricaded themselves inside the bar because they were terrified of us, which is really a delicious little twist of things, isn't it? Yeah, it was also interesting that Biden found a safe haven there, you know, the day after his disastrous debate. You know, so that was kind of interesting.
Right, and he spoke at the thing, and we're going to link to his entire remarks, but let's show you some of what he had to say at the Stonewall.
You marked a turning point in civil rights in America. You inspired the hearts of millions of people around the world. To this day, Stonewall remains a symbol of the legacy of leadership of the LGBTQ plus community, especially trans women of color. Who for generations have been at the forefront of helping realize the promise of America for all Americans. Look, in 2016, President Obama, I was his vice president at the time, designated Christopher Park as a national monument. Today, I'm proud to unveil a new visitor center for Stonewall National Monument, the first ever LGBTQ plus visitor center in the national parks of America. And it matters. It matters. We remain in a battle for the soul of America. I know I've said that for a while now. People looked at me when I first said it like I was kidding. I'm not. We're in the battle for the soul of America. But I look around at the pride, hope, and light that all of you bring. And I know is a battle we're going to win and continue to make progress. LGBTQ plus people are some of the most inspiring people I know.
Well, I'm glad he thinks so. It was great that he was there. Of course, he went on there to meet with the big LGBTQ donors and had a fundraiser with them. But of course, standing with him were a bunch of celebrities. Cynthia Erivo was there singing, and Elton John. And we have a clip of what Elton had to say at this event.
As President Biden has reminded us, today too, we face one of those seminal moments. Do we stand up for our vision and our values, or let misinformation and senseless scapegoating turn back the clock? No fucking way. No.
Yeah, you saw the president making the sign of the cross there when that word was uttered by Elton John, but it was defiant.
Did we also talk about how the subway station now at that location has been renamed?
We are gonna get to that. Can you bring that picture up of the Christopher Street station was renamed for the Christopher Street Stonewall National Monument, Stonewall Station. That's the new name of the station.
And that's the one right outside the Stonewall Bar. So.
But let's stay in national politics because we have scenes from the LGBTQ Pride celebration at the White House lawn, led by First Lady Dr. Jill Biden and her daughter Ashley. We have some pictures of the guests there and everybody there. There they all are. You can see the Buttigiegs there and Karine Jean-Pierre there on the left, and the Buttigiegs on the right, and Dr. Biden's poking out there. Also, Colorado Governor Jared Polis was there. And Dr. Jill Biden spoke on the White House lawn, and we should go to her videotape.
As we celebrate, we know that this community is under attack. Many of you know that all too well and have come here from states that are passing laws targeting LGBTQ Americans. And it feels like we're just caught in this push and pull of progress. There are those who see our communities and our families and wish to tear them down. Those who can't see that the world is so much bigger and beautiful than they know. But when our homes are threatened, when they strip away our rights and deny our basic humanity, we say, not on our watch.
Maybe she should run.
Well, interestingly, her remarks at one point were briefly interrupted by protesters' chants of no pride and genocide, which was quickly drowned out by chants of 4 more years. But that's going to be a recurring thing that happened at a lot of the Pride events.
It did. And you and I were out and about for Pride Week, and we're going to show you some scenes. We're starting out at the drag march. You invited me to join the drag march. Let's put some pictures of that. There's Chris.
I did not go in drag. I have yet to do drag, but I did get my pixie-ish Joey Heatherton wig on.
The drag march's been going on for a long time. We all meet in Tompkins Square Park in the East Village, over where you live. And it's a colorful and defiant gathering that meets in the East Village and then marches to the Stonewall.
Exactly.
Yeah. We got a couple of more pictures there.
And even the famous show up for the drag march in that, there we go, openly gay actor Zachary Quinto, who played Mr. Spock in the rebooted films of Star Trek, was out there marching with us.
And in so many other things. And then, of course, we have some pictures from Donna Aceto from the Dyke March down Fifth Avenue. That's been going on for 30 years. They never get a permit for it. They just do it. And there are some pictures. And the second picture there, those are 2 of our pals from Vermont. Ann Charles there on the right, and her partner, wife, Linda Quinlan. They're from Vermont. They do a lesbian cable show up there in Vermont.
Oh, fabulous.
So we're all, and I just got to see them this week, and I'm happy to see that and of course, they don't need wheelchairs all the time, but in a lot of these marches, they will give you one if you need it for your marching, and they're available, and that's a nice thing. And then finally, you and I went to the Queer Liberation March, which is organized by Reclaim Pride, where we march from the Stonewall to the Battery. No corporations, no floats, just a protest march. It was dedicated to trans youth who held that lead banner. Some of those were trans youth who were marching in their first march. By the way, it was the 50th anniversary of my first march, I'm proud to say.
Congratulations.
This week. But it was also a statement against war and genocide. So many who were attracted to this march, you noticed it, were people protesting the war on Gaza.
Well, I mean, every single chant I heard, and maybe this was just the part of the march I was in, was a protest against the war on Gaza. I get it.
I didn't hear anti-Semitism there, which
I heard one chant that verged. It wasn't anti-Semitic, but it was definitely anti-Israel, the state.
Well, sure.
It verged. I was a little uncomfortable, and I felt bad for anybody Jewish who was there.
I had Jewish friends there, and I have a lot of Jewish friends who, work in the anti-war movement. So it's tough, and these pro-Palestinian protesters, they stopped the New York City Pride parade for a few minutes, and or maybe even longer. So this is the controversy this year. And a couple of years ago, it was about Black Lives Matter, and that was the protest. Yeah. So we're not just about one issue, and you can't confine us to.
Intersectionality is good. I just don't think intersectionality should ever turn into a one-lane expressway.
Okay. All right. And we told you last week that prominent drag artists went to Capitol Hill. They now have united in a new group, Drag Pact, to challenge anti-trans laws and drag bans around the country. And we have a little video of them making an announcement about this pack.
If you can support your local and favorite drag queens by commenting on their social media and their content, then you can go to the polls and vote. Every single vote counts, y'all. And if you're not casting yours, then you're just letting someone else snatch the crown.
Yeah. Did you know that there were
18 million people
eligible to vote who did not vote in the last election?
How you vote matters, and it literally defines the future of not just the country, but your cities, your communities, and your people.
You've got to join us too.
Oh, and I promise you, it is fierce and fabulous over here.
Our diversity is what drives democracy.
We are Drag Pack.
Drag Pack.
We are Drag Pack.
And the future
Will be fabulous. Drag Pack.
So maybe if they won't listen to us, they'll listen to them.
This is fabulous. This is exactly what we need, which is people not sitting on the sidelines, but taking, action into their own hands. And I would further add to what they said is you don't just vote. You get out there and you get other people to vote. You register people to vote where you know it's a swing district or a swing state. That's our job. And when you do that, you're magnifying how much effect you have on the political system. So don't let yourself be confined to a single vote.
Gloria Steinem said, voting isn't the most you can do. It's the least you can do.
It's the beginning.
It's right. It just means going. And it's not. I've never had trouble deciding who to vote for because it's always clear which side I'm on. The fact that people agonize over these decisions, it couldn't be more clear this year. And by the way, some of the founders of that group are from RuPaul's Drag Race alums. William Belli, Broadway's Jinx Monsoon, Miss Peppermint, Monet Exchange, Ben de la Creme, Dylan Berkeley Crane, who previously founded Disability Action for America, a disability rights group, Intersectionality.
And the reason why this is so necessary is because there are at least 527 anti-LGBTQ bills currently pending. I like it better in Spanish, LGBT.
And many of them against drag queens. So instead of being defensive about it, they're getting out there and fighting.
Exactly.
Which is what we all have to do. All right, let's go to the states. I want to give you an interesting, this happened in Utah in the primary. And not that this guy is pro-LGBT so much, but John Curtis won the Republican primary to replace Mitt Romney in the U.S. Senate with Romney's backing, and the Trump-backed candidate lost big. So that's very encouraging because this guy used to be the mayor of Provo, Utah. Mm-hmm. He worked on a compromise on gay rights. They call it the Utah Compromise there. He didn't support the Equality Act because he didn't think it was enough of a compromise. So I'm not saying he's great or anything, but he's not foaming at the mouth like the MAGA people. So that's a small, thing that's encouraging.
And while we're still talking about federal stuff, because we're talking about he's running for U.S. Senate,
yes,
I want to make sure to mention, this is sort of late breaking news, that a third judge in the last 3 weeks has just decided against the Department of Education and its enforcement of Title IX rules to protect LGBTQ students. And this judge's ruling, his name is John Brooms, district judge, and his ruling affects Alaska, Kansas, Utah, and Wyoming. And this is where it gets really crazy. He said there were three rabidly anti-gay groups that push this. He wants the members of those groups to list all the schools where they have students, and those schools now will be included in being exempted from the Biden administration's attempt to protect LGBTQ
This is
students.
a MAGA judge. And the Biden administration also retreated somewhat on trans rights. They're trying to dodge controversy over care for trans youth. Now, again, in this case, they're suing to say you gotta take care of trans kids, you gotta respect them in the schools and all this kind of stuff. But they came out against surgery for trans minors. Now, we've always said on the show, the number of surgeries probably in this country for trans youth you can count on one hand. But so they felt safe saying we're against that surgery.
And they got clobbered the Human Rights Campaign for it. And when you get clobbered by the Human Rights Campaign on trans issues, you know you're doing something really wrong.
Well, but, again, they're also in court defending most transgender affirming care for trans minors. But they just felt they had to make some sort of a compromise on this as they head into the election. I'm not defending them, of course, but there it is. Corporations continue to flee LGBTQ issues in conservative sectors in Tennessee. The Tennessee-based Tractor Supply Company, one of the largest farm supply retailers, withdrew its carbon emissions goals and vowed to stop submitting data to the Human Rights Campaign.
Great.
And will no longer sponsor LGBTQ pride festivals and voter initiatives. We've heard from our customers that we disappointed them.
Nice.
All right.
Are we ready to talk about the Texas Supreme Court?
Yes.
All right. So the Texas Supreme Court, which is composed entirely of Republicans, has refused to block a law that bans gender-affirming care for Texas trans youth. So in other words, a lower court had put a stay on implementation of that new law in Texas, and the Texas Supreme Court has now said, no more stay. This law can go into effect at least until it's adjudicated further and finally decided.
There was a lone dissent. It was an 8-1 decision. That judge called the decision cruel and unconstitutional. But one judge supporting this decision called being transgender make-believe. This is if you watch Fox News all day long, as these right-wing judges and right-wing politicians do, they hammer this trans issue every single day. They do a story on this. And so this is what Alito and Thomas and Gorsuch and all these people watch. This is where they get their news. So they think, it's just like when
it's outside their experience, therefore it cannot exist, it cannot be real.
Well, look, when we lost when the sodomy laws were upheld in 1986, Justice Lewis Powell, who was one of the deciding votes in that decision, said, it was a 5-4 decision, he said he'd never met a gay person. The Supreme Court justice. It turned out one of his clerks was gay, but not out of the closet.
The thing you have to recognize in all of this that we've been talking about today, about the Supreme Court decisions, about the imminent threat of Trump, what's what I'm looking for?
Dictatorship.
Thank you, dictatorship, which really is possible now that he has immunity for his official acts.
He's quite open about it.
So what you have to recognize about all of this is that this has been a slow-moving takeover of the government on state and national levels, and it's our job to do everything we can to fight back. That's why you can't just vote; you got to organize.
Okay.
Andy's in favor of more than that. But.
And aren't people concerned about the kinds of things they have on the agenda? And of course, we've all told you about Project 2025. If they win the White House and the House and the Senate, they are going to implement this thing, and you're going to feel like you got run over by a truck.
To summarize what Project 2025 is, it's their plan to basically wipe away all the civil servants who are supposed to be professionals and nonpartisan and replace them with political hacks who will support Donald Trump in his Donald Trumpness. And that's going to be epic if it happens.
Well, you had Neil Gorsuch in the environmental decision ranting about nitrous oxide when it was what was the
in what, during COVID, you mean?
No. In terms of a chemical that he was he got the wrong chemical is the point, and he wrote it 3 times in the decision.
Oh, jeez.
And the thing is, but now he's transferring all the power to the judges to make these decisions about science when it belongs with the scientists,
as opposed to the professional agencies. That's again going back to this Chevron decision, the Chevron precedent that they wiped away. Anyway.
Nitrous oxide is laughing gas. It's not regulated.
We're all going to need
way.
it soon.
All right, and other things that they're working on now. All 50 states have no-fault divorce. We were the last state in New York to get it, but Republicans in Louisiana, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and Texas are discussing eliminating it or putting restrictions on it, which would be a big blow to the rights of women. So.
While we're talking about Oklahoma,
yeah.
I have to scratch my head at this. Ryan Walters, who is the superintendent of public schools in
No, not Ryan Walters, not Robbie Kaplan.
Yeah, no, that wasn't Ryan Walters. Ryan Walters, who was a superintendent of public schools in Oklahoma, has decided that every public school must teach the Bible.
And if you don't, we will take your teacher's license away. Now, there's a lot of sex and violence. I don't know if they know this. There's a lot of sex and violence in the Bible. I mean, it's absolutely nuts. He says it's a foundational document of American history.
Well, and they sort of cloak it in, oh, well, when you teach about Martin Luther King, you know, he cited the Bible in his civil rights protests. So that's how they're trying to slide it in. Now, normally I would say this is so blatantly unconstitutional that it could not possibly survive Supreme Court review. But with this Supreme Court, you just don't know.
That's right. It's insane. And, you know, forcing people to read books is a good way to make people rebel against them. I mean, countries with state religions have some of the lowest attendance rates at church in the world because, you know, you're essentially obligated to it. So he is just a monster.
And we should add that Ryan Walters is the guy who went under his watch. Next Benedict got assaulted in the bathroom and later died. His response can basically be summed up as nothing to see here.
And Walters said he was inspired to do this by Donald Trump. He says the Bible has been under attack from the teachers' unions, the radical left, and Joe Biden. I mean, come on. Last week we reported on a good decision from the Oklahoma High Court. They overruled giving money to a Catholic school. So he may not prevail even in the Oklahoma courts. And the Attorney General there of Oklahoma, you know, probably a Republican, but still, you know, brought that case. So, because they don't want this conflation of church and state. All right.
All right.
Now we want to talk about Roberta Kaplan.
Yeah, she's, if you should know the name right away. If you don't, to summarize, there are two court cases that basically secured the right to same-sex marriage for us. And one of them was United States versus Windsor, with Edie Windsor in it, who was, you know, our goddess, one of our goddesses. And it was successfully challenged, the federal so-called Defense of Marriage Act. And the person who led that charge, who led that case and argued it before the Supreme Court was Roberta Kaplan. And so that's why you should know her name.
And more recently, she's the woman who brought the E. Jean Carroll suit against Donald Trump, which is costing him, you know, tens of millions of dollars.
So she's a big deal, a BFD.
Yes, she is. And she also brought the case, but why are we talking about her this week? Well, she's left her law firm. She's been sort of forced out of her law firm.
Yeah, she's left under a cloud of
sharp elbows.
Yes, nothing having to do with her performance in her various cases, but everything to do with how she treats other lawyers at the firm she founded. Actually, she founded it with a couple of others, and the New York Times is about to come out with an article about those complaints about how she treats the coworkers, and she bowed out. She started gone on her own with a new firm, and but it's a big deal. She's a huge Democratic player. She and her wife are deeply connected to the Democratic Party.
Yeah. But her case versus the white supremacists in Charlottesville, she also brought that case after the 2017 demonstration where there were fine people on both sides, according to Trump, who were making all this anti-Semitic racist stuff. She won that case and for her plaintiffs, and the court ordered $24 million to be paid. The jury said $24 million to these 8 plaintiffs. That was reduced to $350,000 by a judge, and now it's been raised by a federal appeals court to $350,000 per plaintiff.
Bottom line, we love the work that Robbie Kaplan does. I don't know enough about how she does it to say what's going on there, but obviously other people had enough to say about it that she split off.
I don't know how you feel about adult film star Austin Wolf. This was a story this week, and a viewer said we should really bring it to people's attention. A famous porn star. He's been arrested and charged with possessing and distributing child sexual abuse material online. He's 43 years old, and he is kind of done for.
Well, in other bad news, crime news in El Cajon, California, that's just outside of San Diego, cars were vandalized with swastikas, homophobic slurs, and anti-Arab statements. And I don't believe they have any suspects right now, but they're going to look into it.
got any more crime before we get to our obits?
Go
ahead.
Just in Arizona, a trans woman who was brutally raped in federal prison won $10,000 in damages because she should have been protected. She had asked for $300,000 in damages. She didn't get that. But basically, the only way that anyone knew that she was being raped was because the other inmates raised the alarm for like 5-10 minutes before anybody responded. So she won something, not what she was looking for. But
all right.
Yeah, that was in federal prison.
Well, I'm glad she got a modicum of justice.
Exactly.
And these are two figures, two black lesbians we're going to talk about who passed away this week, who I had not known too much about. You want to talk about Doris Lucky Allen?
Actually, all
right, I'll talk about Doris.
You talk about Doris.
She was an Army intelligence officer who warned, she died at 97. She warned in 1968, she was over there in Vietnam, that they're about to do the Tet an offensive, and she was ignored because she's a black woman, basically. And she was, not a higher up. And of course, this became the Tet offensive. She was a trailblazer for women and people of color in the military. Of course, Tet was a turning point in that war that we ultimately lost. Her intelligence report, in 2009, she was inducted into the Military Intelligence Hall of Fame. She was interviewed in 2020 by Lavender Notes, a publication for older LGBTQ people. She went on to get a PhD in clinical psychology and mentored young psychologists. Quite a woman.
I was particularly moved where there was one point where she said that being inducted into the Intelligence Hall of Fame was really important to her because she shared that honor with, I'm going to mangle the name, I think it's Mary Bowers, who was a freed slave who during the Civil War, she had an eidetic memory, a photographic memory.
Wow.
So she went undercover working in the Confederacy and saw Jefferson Davis's documents, memorized them, remembered them all, and then transmitted the information.
Wow.
So she was particularly moved to be in that same company. So
you won't learn this history in Florida or Oklahoma.
No. Meanwhile, Shea Youngblood has passed on at the age of 64. I'm not super familiar with her work, but she was an author and a playwright, and she wrote something called about the Big Mamas who raised her. It was called Big Mama Stories. It came out in 1989. It was published as a book after it was turned into a play called Shaking the Mess Out of Misery. She also wrote a novel, Black Girls in Paris, that came out in 2000, that became a touchstone for lots and lots of people, young women in particular, and it tells the story of a 26-year-old Southern black woman and her quest for experience in Paris. So,
she was a winner of the Lorraine Hansberry Playwriting Award, named for the lesbian who wrote Raisin in the Sun and died quite young. She was beloved by people like Jacqueline Woodson, also out. Jacqueline said, the black girl writing world is especially small, and the black queer girl writing world is even smaller. So we've known each other a long time. But she said that book you mentioned, Shaken, was the mirror of myself in the world in a bigger way. She also wrote a play called Black Power Barbie, about a brother and sister, both gay, whose parents were Black Panthers, who were both murdered. And the director of the play, Daniel Alexander Jones, said it was a dive into black queerness. So, 64 years old, gone too soon. All right, some Olympic news?
Sure.
Start with the runner.
Okay,
yeah.
So runner Nikki Hiltz is headed to the Paris Olympics. In record fashion, the non-binary reigning and defending 15,000-meter national champ turned in the second fastest 1,500 ever by an American in qualifying for the Paris Olympics.
Yeah, set a record for the trials, and is also the reigning national champion. It's their first Olympic team, and Hiltz's time of 3:55.33 broke the trials record. And then we have a judo player.
Timo Cavelius from Germany. He's 27, and he is the first out judo martial artist in the Olympics.
Gay male
in the Olympics. And he gave a really interesting statement because he's been out since he's 15. Yeah. And so he's like, this is no big deal. And he said,
go ahead.
He said, a well-known German tabloid actually wanted to do a big story about my sexuality. This is in a 2020 interview. He said, but because I can't tell a sad or shocking story about my coming out, they dropped the topic.
That's true. They're not interested if it's not sad.
So I would just say to him, viel Glück.
All right.
Good luck.
Now, we also want to talk about pride around the world. And of course, it was around the country, but also around the world. Internationally, in Turkey, hundreds gathered in Istanbul for a pride march. There you see some of them getting out there, but it had already been barred by the government. They were told they couldn't do it.
Safety issues, quote unquote.
And so this is the Erdogan government, which is very reactionary, and it was shut down by, and it led to the arrest of 15 people.
Basically, the march had already dispersed by the time the cops got there to break it up. And so they just kind of went down the street.
March.
They grabbed some 15 people they could find.
Well, in the first New York Pride March, and I know my Chicago viewers out there, you had the first one the day before the New York one. Okay, all right. But in the first New York one, they thought they were going to get shot at, and they practically ran up 6th Avenue, just looking all around them. And it turned out to be great.
Well, kudos to those Turkey Pride ralliers, because they had shut down the entire center of the city completely to try to prevent this, and they still managed to get their march in. That is the kind of grit and determination we have to start showing in our struggles here.
Well, and if you think we've got problems, try living in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, there's no anti-gay law there, but the new Justice Minister, Constant Mutamba, has ordered public prosecutors to prosecute LGBTQ people anyway. As a member of parliament, he proposed a law to criminalize same-sex intimacy with 15-year prison sentences. Now he's trying to do that extrajudicially. An LGBTQ activist there reported in the wake of this crackdown that his house was surrounded by police, and in despair, he wanted to take his own life. And by the way, I hear from those of you who listen in some of these countries are writing to us. I mean, we're a television show. I mean, we try to refer you to other organizations that can really help you, but they're out there and they're desperate.
One of them is Rainbow Railroad, and I give them just an automatic payment every month that comes off my credit card to try to support getting, and it's takes its name from the whole idea of an underground railroad to get people out of these places where they are in dire peril and get them to someplace safe. So Rainbow Railroad is one of those organizations you can look into.
And we also want to thank all of the viewers who made Pride donations to Gay USA in June. That was terrific. You're keeping us going. I don't know how much longer we could do this, but we're going to hang in here. We're not quitting. Thank you.
Meanwhile, another place where it's really hard to be gay, in Russia, the LGBTQ community has been turning to an encrypted app called Telegram to communicate with each other, because basically everything else has already been shut down. They've been trying to use VPNs, which hide where you're accessing the internet and sort of makes it seem like you're coming from a foreign country. But even that can be subject to crackdown. So they've been using this Telegram. There is, however, a risk that even that could possibly be monitored. So they are doing everything they can to try to communicate with each other and stay in touch with each other in Russia.
In London, a Jewish LGBTQ group, Keshet UK, withdrew from the Pride March over safety concerns. They just decided to have a picnic with the West London Synagogue. They say organizers of Pride in London accused Israel of committing genocide. In a statement on social media, and anti-Semitic incidents have been steadily rising there after the breakout of the war and the Hamas attacks and Israel's subsequent war. And so, this is an issue around the world.
Well, it came up in Toronto. Yes. At their Pride March. The Toronto Pride March, I think it was about 3 hours into it, when it was completely stopped by pro-Palestinian protesters who blocked the path. And they presented a list of demands to have the Toronto Pride organizers sign, and they wouldn't. And then at that point, Toronto Pride said, well, in the interest of security and safety, we're just canceling the Pride March any further, for for that day, so they just stopped it.
We also have a picture from Toronto of the longest rainbow pathway in the world, 600 meters in Hanlan's Point, which was the site of the first Pride there in Toronto in 1971. They're calling this the Long Walk to Equality. Well, it's taking a long time, isn't it?
Slow walk. Any other Pride?
Well, no, international news.
Well, in Aruba, the parliament has rejected marriage equality in a tied vote. It is one of the constituent countries, whatever that means. I don't know how that shakes out, of the Netherlands. So, you know, like the French have different islands that are considered counties or parishes or whatever. I don't know how it works in the Netherlands. But unfortunately, there are some Netherlands constituent countries that do have same-sex marriage, but this is not one of them. Likely, this is going to be imposed by the Dutch Supreme Court in any case, so we'll see what happens.
And the Netherlands has moved to the right, but even their right wing is generally not anti-gay. And by the time many of you see this, the UK should have elected a center-left government in the Labour Party.
But meanwhile, France is drifting to the right horribly.
Well,
we'll see what happens.
It's not completely over, but it has moved to the far right. Yeah. While everything is going backwards here, same-sex couples in Latvia have started registering their civil unions. So we have a picture there of Maximus Ringo and Yanis Lux. They were the first, but couples lined up across the country in Riga right after midnight. This couple exchanged silver rings, holding off on gold rings until same-sex marriage is legalized. They've been together for 5 years. Countries in Europe, in the European Union without civil unions: Bulgaria, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia, and Romania. Latvia, by the way, has an out gay president. They do.
There you go.
All right. Georgia, the country of Georgia, the parliament there in Eastern Europe, they've advanced a bill effectively outlawing LGBTQ identity.
There's a shock.
They're moving towards Russia. It's terrible. A note on Ian McKellen. He'd been playing Falstaff in the West End production of Player Kings, an adaptation of parts 1 and 2 of Henry IV. He fell off the stage and he couldn't complete the run there, and he's supposed to go around the country with it, but he said, his doctors say, in the interests of, recovering, he has canceled that. So our thoughts go out to him. But he's just wrapped up work on a new film called The Critic, coming this late summer, where he plays a feared and vicious theater critic who's gay, who finds himself in the crosshairs of the paper's new owner, and it gets very juicy. It looks terrific.
Huh. Does that mean we've segged into entertainment news?
Well, I got one little AIDS note, because we told you that the city was cutting AIDS funding by $5.3 million. The city council restored it over Mayor Adams' objections.
Actually, did Adams object to the restoration?
Well, he doesn't object to the restoration once they made the deal, but he was the one who cut it.
Yeah, well, this is the dance they always do with all kinds of things like library funding and AIDS funding, and they're always like,
we got it back.
Yeah,
somebody got screwed though, and well.
No, they always say, they withhold it, and then somebody finds the money and they make it happen.
Let's go to entertainment news.
All right. Well, was a big Star Wars fan in my youth.
Yeah, read his book.
I kind of fell off it because they got a little crazy with all that stuff. But the new Star Wars on Disney Plus, because they have it on television now as well, and it's a series called The Acolyte, and it features lesbian space witches. It doesn't get any better than that. Now, I have not seen it. I have only heard about it, but I may check it out, even though I'm kind of off the whole Star Wars thing.
We want pictures.
Yeah, I should have. Because there are some good-looking lesbian space witches and some really alien-looking lesbian space witches. But you can tell I just love saying the phrase lesbian space witches. Yes. Anyway.
All right.
So check out The Acolyte if you want to.
Last week, Maren Johns, who is going to be filling in for Anne next week, as she was last week, she reviewed the play N/A, which is about Nancy Pelosi and AOC, right, at Lincoln Center. And I finally saw it. And, Maren loved it. And it is a very amusing and interesting two-hander about the older Nancy Pelosi, mainstream liberal from San Francisco, and AOC, the radical. And I really laughed very hard at Holland Taylor there, who plays Nancy. She gets all the good lines, though. AOC is just portrayed as more doctrinaire, and I just wish it were more balanced, because if you've seen AOC on television, she's sharp, she's funny, she's terrific. So I just wish it were a little bit more balanced.
And I recognize that Holland Taylor, didn't she play the one of the law professors in Legally Blonde, I believe?
She may have. I mean, she's married to Sarah Paulson, who just won the Tony for Appropriate. And my friend Chris Cooper here, of course, we announced it on the show, just won an Emmy Award for Extraordinary Birder on Nat Geo. All right. And comedian Amber Ruffin has come out, the first black woman writer for any late night talk show. That's kind of appalling that it took that long. Really? But she wrote for Late Night with Seth Meyers, and later host of the late night talk show of her own, The Amber Ruffin Show. She's officially come out as queer, posting, "In what will come as a shock to zero people, I'm using the last day of Pride to come out. Be proud of who you are, little babies. I know I am, and I can't wait to be discriminated against for a new reason." That's pretty funny.
That is pretty funny.
So we do have a couple of minutes here.
What, did we really get through all that disastrous news in time
I hope
out?
we didn't depress you too much. We're trying to be realistic about how I'm hurting.
It was a bad week.
I am hurting.
It was a bad week.
I'm hurting. I mean, this is like this is so. It's so bad, but you hear lots of mainstream people, you don't need us to tell you about this. I mean, Lawrence Tribe, said this is that thing about the immunity decision with Trump is the worst decision in the history of the court. It just overthrows, 250 years. And we're supposed to be celebrating our independence from a king, not creating one in the White House.
Well, there is one way to make sure we don't create one in the White House, and that is for all of us not only to vote, but to get other people to vote, to register voters in swing states. Do whatever you have to do on your part so that when you wake up on November, 3rd, 4th, whatever it is this year, the day after the election, you can hold your head high no matter how it turned out and say, I did my part so that we could have the best possible outcome.
Well, that is what we have to do. As I say, that is what we have to do in the short run. I think we have to think more creatively about how to make change in society. I think more of us need to get our state legislatures in the states where we have some control and power to implement more things while we can, before they start passing national bans on the things that we want.
And all the more important in the face of Biden's debate flub and how that's going to play out in the election, but all the more important that we flip the House, the House of Representatives, because that's going to be our bulwark. I'm going to mess up that word, against
Firewall.
Trump. Firewall, thank you, against Trump if he does get back into office. So.
Somewhat, but again, when you always have the Supreme Court overruling everything the Congress does, even the good things the Congress does, like the Voting Rights Act, well, we're down to our last 20 seconds.
Andy, it's been a pleasure as always.
Oh, thank you so much for coming in, Chris. Happy Independence Day to everybody. Let's get the spirit of 1776 back.
And Andy, we'll see you next week.
And we look forward to that. And Ann will be back in 2 weeks. Thanks, Chris.